All right, we're live.
All right, hello everybody. I bet we still have people who are just joining the live stream, so we're going to give folks a minute, but we want to welcome you to this conversation. We are very, very lucky to be joined by three extraordinary Texas leaders who've been on the forefront of the fight for reproductive rights, for healthcare for all Texans, and making sure that the state lives up to its full potential and promise to each of us. And we happen to be having this conversation on the 49th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, an anniversary that we acknowledge at the same time that Texas lives under the most draconian reproductive healthcare laws in the United States of America, the most draconian laws that have existed in this country in the last 49 years. To bring all of our viewers up to speed, in the state of Texas, after this last legislative session, and thanks to our current governor who signed it into law, the law now says that no woman in this state will be able to obtain an abortion after about 6 weeks, and that anyone who assists any person in obtaining reproductive in this state can be pursued with a reward of a $10,000 bounty for any American who turns any Texan in. It has had terrible consequences for the women of this state who have had to leave Texas, for those who are able to, who have the financial resources, the time and the wherewithal to go to Oklahoma or other nearby states to get reproductive health care, to get justice, and to be able to live within the constitutional protections that should have been upheld in Texas and by the Supreme Court. And the last thing that I'll say before I get a chance to introduce those to whom we'll be able to listen to right now is that for the fourth time, those in Texas who are seeking justice and full constitutional rights or recognition of those rights, for a fourth time, we appealed to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And for the fourth time since this abortion ban has become law in our state, that appeal was rejected. I'm just going to read a sentence from Justice Sonia Sotomayor's dissent this past Thursday. She writes, "Today, for the fourth time, this court declines to protect pregnant Texans from the egregious violations of their constitutional rights." That is exactly what is happening in our state right now. And I want to make sure that we all have a chance to listen to and learn from three people who are going to help bring us through, because they are three people who have helped against some pretty long odds in the past to protect a woman's right to make her own decisions about her own body, her own health care, and her own future. The three that you're about to hear from are Representatives Donna Howard, Lina Ortega, and Celia Israel. Now, many of you may know that I am from El Paso, live in El Paso with my wife, Amy. We're raising our three kids in El Paso. Celia Israel, though she represents a district in Austin in the state legislature and is running for mayor of Austin right now, is from El Paso. And Lina Ortega is also from El Paso and represents a district in El Paso in the state legislature. And so Donna Howard is outnumbered by El Pasoans on this phone call, but she is the universally acknowledged leader on reproductive health care issues in the state legislature. And frankly, in the state of Texas, she is a nurse. She is someone beyond her role as a legislator, has just been a fierce advocate and has helped to engage and inspire so many other Texans in this fight. So I'm going to now turn it over to Representative Howard so that we can hear from her just what this moment means to Texas. And Representative Howard, we're also interested in your leadership and guidance on how all of us can meet this moment and overcome the challenges that we just described. So Representative Howard, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Beto. And I know I'm outnumbered by El Pasoans, but I love El Paso and I love El Pasoans. So there's that. This is a momentous day for us to be here. We had basically a half century of constitutional protections, which are no longer being afforded to Texans. And I think that's a really important point that we need to think about here. I came of age before Roe v. Wade. I know what it was like when women did not have control over their own bodies and their own destinies. They didn't have the opportunity to make employment and education choices that we've had for the past half a century. And it has made a huge difference to be able to have those choices and those opportunities. We have seen session after session, one more obstruction to access to abortion. It has been just relentless since basically 2010 in the state legislature, which is when the Tea Party took over in the legislature and brought the culture wars to Texas. What we've seen with Senate Bill 8 is just beyond comprehension. Beto's already referred to what happened, but the fact is that they put language in there that allows a private cause of action and circumvents any judicial remedy. So contrary to what's happened with previous obstructions that we've seen, we don't even have the courts to protect us this time. And the Supreme Court has basically turned away from giving us those protections. So despite the fact that every other American has a constitutional right to access to abortion, in Texas, we currently do not have that with SB 8. That is absolutely egregious that that's going on. And we certainly know that elections matter. The fact that Trump came in and made 3 appointments to the Supreme Court has set us up for where we are right now, with the real possibility of, on this occasion of when Sarah Weddington won this case, of having it overturned, and what we're experiencing right now in Texas being actually what will be the law in our state from here on out, and even worse, because there, even though we have a brief little window of access right now, that will also be gone. And to make this even worse, I've talked with a bunch of OB-GYNs about this. This is not just affecting abortion. This is affecting those who want to carry their pregnancies to full term and actually have complications. And the doctors are telling me that now they are being very cautious about how they move forward because they're concerned about the liability that is being imposed on them. They actually said to me that we are going to be waiting for women to die because they cannot intervene in a preventive way ahead of when something might happen. They have to wait until it gets to that emergency situation. So what we're talking about now, in a time when Texas is the leader in maternal morbidity and mortality, is forced pregnancies that are going to impact the health and welfare of Texans. And we have legislators who really don't even understand the science or are giving us misinformation, who are not even following what the doctors say, and not absolutely not allowing the Constitution to protect Texans. It is absolutely beyond the pale what is happening right now. And we are going to need everyone to recognize that and to fight back on what's been happening. And I am so happy to have my colleagues here with me that are going to talk to you some more about this. I'm going to turn it over now to Representative Lina Ortega.
Let me start by saying thank you, Beto, for inviting us to be here with you and for bringing attention to what is an incredibly important issue for this state and the ramifications that SB 8 is going to have across our entire nation because of the actions that the governor put upon us and the type of legislation and policy and law that he wanted enacted. As my colleague Donna has mentioned, and let me just say it's been a privilege to serve with Donna. She has been a true leader when it comes to healthcare. She is the chair of the Texas Healthcare Committee, and it's really an honor to be there with also Celia Israel. I mean, we've got some very strong Democratic women serving in the House. And as she mentioned, I mean, this is just not an attack on reproductive rights. It is a healthcare issue, and it's significantly dangerous in a state that leads much of the rest of the nation when it comes to maternal mortality. The attack on reproductive rights in Texas is about much more than just abortion. More than half of this state's women's healthcare clinics have closed in the recent years. And it's going to get worse with everything that's going on. It's reducing access to critical services like cervical cancer screening. So, and the thing also about SB 8, it brings about restrictions that disproportionately harm and affect women of color, Black, Latino women throughout the state of Texas, as well as it affects the indigenous communities. And it also affects people with disabilities, people in rural areas, young people, immigrants like many of us in our community, and those that are just having difficult making meets end, especially with what's going on, the pandemic that is lasting way too long. I'm going to now pass it to Representative Israel.
Thank you, Rep. Ortega and Rep. Howard. For those of you who are watching, if you these are heavy-handed and extremist policies that we're talking about. If the Supreme Court won't save us, it's going to be on Texas to get it right. The fight is going to come back to the states, is what it appears, though, as it will. We will do everything that we can. And if you don't know, we have some amazing fighters in the Texas legislature, like Rep. Howard and like Rep. Ortega, who draw upon our predecessors in strong women who came before us, strong women like the first Mexican-American woman to serve, Ima Rangel, Ann Richards, Barbara Jordan, and of course, the great Sarah Weddington. We come from strong leaders, and there are strong leaders who are ready to take up this fight again. We have a lot of organizing and work to do. Every even numbered year is an opportunity to find more voters and make that case. Beto, I know you care deeply about this, and we will be there for you up and down the ballot, making sure that people know how important not only your race is, but all of the races that'll be on the ballot this year. Beto, I take it back to you, and I thank you for including these badass women in your presentation today.
Celia, thank you so much. And I think what Representative Howard said at the outset, so important for all of us to remember, and everyone who's watching right now and listening right now. And we have a few minutes left with these three great representatives. If you have a question for one of them, a comment, a story that you want to share, our friend Gina is watching and looking for your comments, and she'll pass those over to me, and we'll have a chance to read some of those out if we still have time for this at the end. But what Donna said that really got me was, she said, this isn't something that happened in 2022. It's not even something that happened in 2021 when this legislation passed and was signed into law. She mentioned the year 2010, because since then, reproductive healthcare clinic after reproductive healthcare clinic began to close down as the Republican majority Texas legislature passed more restrictive reproductive healthcare laws. Republican governors signed those bills into law, and it became harder not just to obtain your constitutional right to an abortion, but as Representative Ortega pointed out, it became harder just to get a cervical cancer screening or any kind of reproductive healthcare, or just the ability to see a doctor in a lot of really underserved communities. Many people know this, but for those who don't, we're the least insured state in the country. So harder in Texas than in any other state to see a doctor or provider of any kind. And that's just for starters. Now you add on top of that these restrictions to see a reproductive healthcare provider, and you get what we have now, which is this epicenter of maternal mortality and morbidity that Donna just referred to at the outset. So this is also, to Celia's point, that this is a function of our democracy. We've had a number of elections leading up to 2010 and since 2010, and albeit it's harder to vote in this state than it is anywhere else. They don't make it easy on us, but Celia ended on the right note. There's no cavalry riding to the rescue. The Supreme Court has declined this, and we wish they wouldn't have, but it's done. The United States Congress, though we have majorities in both houses, has also declined to make this a federal law and have statutory federal protection for the women of Texas and every other state. Wish it were different, but we have no control over them. And we are where we are right now. So now it is on us. And it's on us to support women like those who are leading in positions like these on this call, other great candidates and office holders who will do the right thing if given the opportunity to hold a position of power and public trust, and all of us to get out there and vote and help our friends and neighbors and family members register to vote so that we can make a difference. This is one of the lowest voter turnout states in the country. And so I would argue that these reproductive health care bans that have been passed by our legislature are not reflective of the people of Texas, because millions of our fellow Texans aren't voting. So to Representative Howard, there are a couple of questions that have come in. Let me read one of them to you. What options do women in Texas right now have to receive an abortion? And if you or any of the other representatives want to direct viewers to any organization, be it Planned Parenthood or otherwise, that they can donate to and help, that supports women who are trying to receive reproductive health care, please let us know. But Donna, Representative Howard, if there is a woman in Texas who wants to receive an abortion, what are her options today?
Very, very limited. Right now, this piece of legislation, it basically prevents any abortions after 6 weeks gestation. And let me just say that 6 weeks gestation is measured from the first day of your last menstrual period. So it's really, if on average, 4 weeks since fertilization, 2 weeks since a missed period, if you happen to be regular. So it's before many people even know that they are pregnant. And then you have to jump through all the hoops that the legislature's put in place of the 24-hour sonogram ahead of time and all the things that just make it very, very difficult for you to even get that first appointment prior to the time that you no longer are able to get an abortion in Texas. So what we see is so many people having to travel out of state. And that means that you have to have the resources. You have to have childcare. You have to be able to take off work. You have to find the money to be able to do this, to be able to probably stay at least overnight, if not several nights, because of all the restrictions there. So we're talking about a very limited access right now, and that's made it virtually where we are a state with no access to abortion, even though this is health care, even though this is protected by our Constitution, and those in Texas are not being afforded that same protection.
Representative Israel, is there a group, or are there groups or nonprofits that people can support here in Texas or nationally that will help women who face the tough decisions or choices that Representative Howard just outlined and who are living under these conditions right now? Anywhere that you can point us towards that would be helpful?
I think Rep. Howard probably knows that. I'm drawing a blank, Donna, that there's an organization that helps low-income women with transportation and housing costs.
You're talking about the Lilith Fund, perhaps? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lilith Fund, so people can give to that. It hurts my heart to have to say that, Beto, because recommending that, because we're talking about, I mean, geez, if men had to create a fund to go get their ED drugs, can you imagine that? Why do women have to do these kinds of gymnastics to take care of their bodies, plan their futures, and no exceptions in this law for rape or incest? No one ever thought that we would see this day. And when we were all fighting this on the House floor, it was just so surreal, because there's so many of our Republican friends who never thought that this extremist piece of legislation would ever get out of committee, much less make it to the floor and onto the governor's desk. It's Neanderthal, in my opinion.
Well, it's all about leadership in the state of Texas, top state leadership. And until we get change at this level, things are going to continue to happen that affect women across our state and now are going to affect people across the nation because of what's going on with the US Supreme Court. And then going back to your question, I mean, I highly recommend that people donate to Planned Parenthood. Our office, actually, the Planned Parenthood office in El Paso was closed for several years, and it just reopened a few years ago. And I know that they need as much assistance as they can get, and they are helping women in every way that they can. So I'd recommend that people donate to the El Paso Planned Parenthood in this area, because it's really important to help out.
That's helpful. And maybe one last question for anyone who knows the answer to this. Because the Supreme Court declined to take the Texas case or take action in the Texas case, and it now looks to be going to the state Supreme Court, when are we likely to see a Supreme Court ruling on this issue? For example, in the Mississippi case, anything that you all, and this will be our last question, anything that we should be expecting in the near term, knowing full well, again, as Representative Israel said, that this is now, at least in Texas, going to be on all of us for the foreseeable future until there is some federal intervention. Representative Howard, are you able to give us a little bit of
I mean, I think that, I think what people are assuming here is that the Texas Supreme Court is going to drag its feet and not take this up for several months at a minimum. In the meantime, the Supreme Court is expected to rule probably in June in regard to the 15-week ban. So what everybody's kind of bracing for right now is that the Supreme Court will overrule Roe v. Wade and go ahead with the 15-week ban, opening it up to states to then be able to basically do whatever they want to do after that, no longer have the protection of viability, which is what Roe v. Wade had established. And we also had legislation that this Republican legislature under Abbott passed, that is the so-called trigger bill, that if indeed that does happen, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, then Texas will immediately basically ban abortion, as will a bunch of other states. So it will be a very dark time in terms of women having opportunities. There was another piece of legislation that was passed that even prevents the mailing of this very, very safe abortion drugs that people use. So, you know, it's really going to take a lot of people coming together and figuring out how do we move forward so that women can continue to be equal parts of this society and have opportunities that the sperm donors have always had.
Well said, Representative Howard, Representative Israel, Representative Ortega. Thank you all for doing this Zoom call and live stream with us today. And more importantly, on behalf of everyone in Texas, for your leadership on this. And the hope we have is with you and your ability to guide all of us to take the action necessary ultimately to overcome this. And no two ways about it. It's going to be very, very tough. And I think we made the case. It is a very, very dark time for women in the state of Texas and by extension, nationally, based on what Texas and Mississippi and the Supreme Court are doing right now. So let's all acknowledge that, commit ourselves to doing what it takes, and make sure that we come through. Thank you all very much for doing this. And thanks to everyone who's joining the live stream. And we'll see you soon. Adios. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beto.
Bye.